So YieldMax MSTY went X today, so the price was adjusted due to the distribution. Let's just check out the Webull chart and see what it did. Hello my friends, this is Legend. So MSTY did go X today. It started going up and then it started backing off some as Bitcoin did drop some. So we're going to take a look at the charts and see where it's at now. The YieldMax MSTY website shows a distribution rate of 86.32. So let's just go ahead and check the chart out and see where we're at. All right, so here we are on the MSTY chart. And as you can see, the price did drop due to the distribution because today is X date. It closed yesterday at $22.19. It opened today at $20.94. Now I did purchase a couple more shares today, and I actually ended up getting a total of only 5 shares at $20.73 per share. Now I only got 5 shares because I'm still waiting on it to hit my trigger points. But due to the drop of the price, due to the X date, I also wanted to go ahead and just get a few shares of MSTY just to catch that drop. But as you can see, it did drop a bit more today. All right, so we're looking at the actual chart currently. And as you can see, we had that line that we drew at $20.38. And where I got that from is that's just where it had hit a few times. And actually, if I draw it out far enough here, you can see at the very first when it opened at $20.38. So that was a pretty good line in the sand here to draw. And currently, as you can see, we did go down below that $20.38. We actually closed just under it at $20.27. Now, let me show you something that's very interesting on the 5-minute chart. And you can take it for what you will. But here we are on the 5-minute chart. And as you can see here, we did have a bit of a rough down day for a lot of the stocks. But MSTY did fall down here, and just kind of funny to see this, and I wanted to show you. But if you see this candle right here, and I'll zoom in on it, it actually hit $20.38. I mean, on the money. And that's where we had drawn that line, because that also was when it first opened at that $20.38, or at least the recorded opening of MSTY. So it actually hit that $20.38 during today's run and then bounced off of it. But what did it do again? Notice it also started coming back down, and then it come down and hit. And where did it hit? Well, let me zoom in and you'll see the number pop up. $20.38. That's crazy, right? So came down and it's just chipping away at it. So you can kind of think of it that way. Now I know this is MSTY and it's not a stock, and it doesn't work like a stock does because they just sell calls, and it just moves somewhat in line with MSTR. But it's still fun to look at the charts and just to kind of get an idea of some of the moves on it, right? So it came down, it hit that $20.38 and went back up, and then came back down again. What did it hit as far as in the low right here? You might not be able to see it, but if you look at this little number up here next to this L for low, if you look when I hover over it, it hit $20.38. And it actually closed at that 5-minute candle at $20.38. So this thing hit it 3 times. And it's kind of like a little, jackhammer that eventually you hit something enough times at the same spot, you're weakening it, and then eventually it breaks through. And that's kind of what it looks like happened, right? Now we can look at MSTR and we'll see something very similar with MSTR. It's just that MSTY come down, hit that $20.38 3 times, and then finally broke down below it. And then that line became more of a resistance line for the 5-minute time frame here. But if I go back to the day time frame, you can see it did go down below it, as we just saw, but it is still through the line. So I'm not too worried about it. And if it can come on down, it could give us a nice buy point. Now, this is still the actual chart. Now, to look at the indicators, I'm going to flip the chart to the adjusted chart, and we're going to take a look at the indicators then. So I'll just change this from actual to adjusted, and now we can look at the adjusted chart, and I can turn on my indicators like my Bollinger Band here, and as you can see, it is on the lower half, and that RSI2 is coming down, and it got as low as 24.19. Now, if it can get below that 10 tomorrow, then I might buy a few more shares. And keep in mind, this is just what I am doing. You've got to make your own decisions of what your portfolio can handle and what your plan is for MSTY, or even if you even want to invest into MSTY. But let's take a look at MSTR and see where it's at to help us understand MSTY a little bit better. So here we are on MSTR, and if I look at that 5-minute chart, you'll see something very similar, right? The numbers are different, but the chart candles are roughly the exact same, right? You can see it came down, tested that, went up, came down, tested it again, went up, and then right here on this candle is where it tested again. So that's that 3 points that we were looking at earlier on MSTY. You can see that those same points are very similar to MSTR. So now if we look at the day interval for MSTR, we can see on the Bollinger Band here, we are on the bottom half of that Bollinger Band. That RSI2 is coming on down. We are currently sitting at 23.55. That momentum is pretty flat on the negative side, and it honestly hasn't moved a whole lot throughout here. It's been quite flat for a few days. So not much going on with MSTR in that retrospect, but we did have some negative volume here, some red volume selling pressure. And like I said, with that red candle, we ended up closing at 368.79. So the price dropped $9.31 for a total of minus 2.46% drop on MSTR. Now, comparing that percent drop to MSTY, let's compare that. So if MSTR dropped 2.46%, what did MSTY drop? 2.17%. So very close, but we actually didn't drop the full amount that MSTR did. So that's a positive sign. But the one thing that we do have to watch is Bitcoin. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so here we are on Bitcoin. And as you can see, this is kind of where we were looking at a few days ago, where it came into this area and it kind of bounced off of it, right? Got pushed back up, and then it started coming back down and getting back into this area. And wow, it just kind of really blew right through it, didn't it? I mean, we're down to 101.2K. Now that is a bit below my green box here. I have my green box at around 101.5, say, and the top being around 104.5. So currently we're sitting at 101.1. So we are below that green box, and we did make a new low for the last couple of weeks here. As you can see, we did drop down to as low as 100.3. Notice that the momentum here on the negative side did increase today. That bar there is a little larger than the one before, so it did increase on the downside. You can see this orange line did take a slight turn further down, and you can see that the RSI is down to 41.54. So we're not quite oversold yet. Anything below 30 is when you start getting into that oversold territory. So with that big red candle, that's a lot of selling and a 3.59% drop for the day. But is that just too much selling? And tomorrow, could we see a move back up? It's a question, and it's something to think about. But with that momentum increasing, then we could be seeing a little bit more of a downturn, and we might be coming down to test this support line at 97.9K. Now, I don't necessarily want to see it below 100, but doesn't mean that it won't happen, right? But sometimes things just have to kind of chill, cool down a little bit, and then once it kind of starts scaring everybody out, then it can take off again. But that is, again, just my opinion. And that's all it is, my opinion, and it doesn't mean anything because I can't predict the future and neither can anybody else. We're all just looking at the same indicators and we're all just making our judgment accordingly. But one other thing that I also wanted to make a mention of, if I go back to MSTY here, and I'm looking at MSTY, one thing that I'm thinking of maybe adding to how I am getting into more shares, and that could be like today when we had the X date and I did buy a few more shares, just a couple, at near the opening of the day just to get some of that price drop. So basically, in a way, I got paid the distribution by getting the shares of the price of MSTY cheaper. So there is one thing that I'm thinking of maybe adding to how I am purchasing shares during like the X date time frame, and that is possibly putting in a limit order the day before the X date. And let me kind of show you what I mean. So first of all, let's change the chart back to the actual so we can see the actual numbers here and the actual stock candle movements. And we'll switch that to actual, hit done. And now we're looking at the actual stock movement of the candles. So yesterday we had the close of $22.19. So I'm going to pull a calculator up here and we'll say $22.19. That was the close of Wednesday. Now we know on that same day, that Wednesday, we knew we were going to get $1.47 distribution. So I can take that close and I can subtract off 1.47. And then that gives me $20.72. So if I was to buy the shares at $20.72, then I, in essence, got that distribution for those shares. And I think you can agree with that mindset. But what I'm thinking of possibly adding to my arsenal is knowing that I got $1.47 in this example that we got the announcement and we know that it closed at $22.19, then I can put in a limit order for a price that would be, say, under this price, $20.72. And that way I will have basically earned that distribution by getting the share price under that, or at least at that distribution price, being deducted out of the current stock price. And then I can put in some kind of little factor, right? If it's $20.72 and that would be the break even, then I could say, okay, I'll put a limit order in at $20.50. So at $22.19 minus the $20.50 means I will have basically earned $1.69 versus $1.47 that they actually paid out, if you get my drift. So I can make up whatever number I want, but that way I am basically getting my price of MSTY cheaper and in a way earning that distribution in the way of getting the stock price lower, subtracting out that distribution. So I could put in a limit order on Wednesday night after hours, and if it hit that buy price anytime through the night or up until the morning. Of course, the X date is when that price will drop down, right? And that happens usually around about 4 o'clock in the morning, but I'm not up during that time. So if it did drop and then drop down even lower, then it could pick me up at that lower price. And let's just look at the 5-minute chart and I can show you what I mean. And here we are on the 5-minute chart, and we'll go over here. Now granted, throughout the day there, it kept dropping, right? It kept dropping, could have got it even cheaper than that. But you never know what it's going to do. So at 4 o'clock, as you can see right here, it's about, 4 o'clock in the morning, and that takes that dump of the price, right? Because that's the distribution right there. And as you can see, here's the candles up here. Then the distribution comes out of the price. Therefore, it drops down to that amount in addition to any night movement of that price itself. It opens at that 4 o'clock right here. And then my limit would be active. So if it ever did drop down to, say, that $20.50, it would then execute, and I would be buying those shares at $20.50. Now in this case, it did not get that low in the pre-market. Looks like it got as low as about $20.70. Looks like right here, maybe $20.69 on the pre-market. So it did not quite make that $20.50, but it did end up hitting it eventually after it opened, right? But sometimes in the pre-market, it does dip down and it could buy at a lower price, and you can get your shares at that lower price in hopes that once it opens, we do start getting a movement back up. Either way, I'm okay buying a few shares more of Misty, and if it keeps coming on down, looks like tomorrow I might be buying a few more. But that is just me. Definitely do not follow what I'm doing. Do your own research and make your own decisions of what to do in Misty or any other ETF or stock that you are investing into or trading. So I think I'm going to wrap it up right there. If you don't mind, hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, be much appreciated. And as always, I am not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. Please do your own due diligence before you get into any stock plays. And until next time, legend out.